Hey, what's up guys? Hardleg Joe here with a profile for my Tenyi Metalfoe deck, T-Foes as I call them, the greatest combination of non-effect monsters and Super Poly since ever, as far as I know. Anyway, for our monster lineup, we have 10 Metalfoes total. We have 2 Big Rigs Over-the-Road Racing, 3 ATV Off-Road Fury, 2 Ace Combat, and 3 Ride to Hell Retribution. The rest of our monsters are Tenyis. We've got 3 Golden Dragon, 2 Black Dragon, 2 Green, 2 Red, 2 Blue, and 2 Brown. For spells, we've got 3 of the Tenyi Love Child between Rhoda and Foolish Burial, Twin Twisters, 3 motherfucking Super Poly, and 3 Pot of Greedland. For traps, we're on 3 Spoon Counters. No, literally, the man is fighting a spoon, just look at it. And 3 copies of Solemn Tenyi. Our extra deck consists of 1 Spoon Man, 1 Big Piercy Boy, Clutch Removal, a couple of Super Poly targets, 1 Edward Elric, 2 Guts, 1 Slayer Foes Electromite, 2 Princess Katanas, Link Arrows on a Stick, and 3 Uptown Monk. The side deck I'll go over in a bit. So at its core, this is mainly a Tenyi deck, which has a kind of protect the castle style gameplay, meant to whittle down your opponent's resources by making your monsters really difficult to get rid of. I've heard people compare them to Boojins, and those people are not far off. The big difference between Boojins and Tenyi, though, is where Boojins were locked exclusively into their own archetype, Tenyi offers support for all non-effect monsters. If you're unfamiliar with that term, it's pretty simple. Any monster without an effect is a non-effect monster. Normal monsters? Well, those are non-effect monsters. How about this Link guy? Well, he's got no effect, so he's a non-effect monster. Same thing with this Fusion monster and this Pendulum monster, which is why, you know, these 2 archetypes go together so well. Surprisingly, for a deck based around non-effect monsters, all their main deck monsters have effects. If you control no effect monsters, you can special summon them from the hand. So if you've got an open field, you special summon one, then send it to the graveyard for their Link 1 Tenyi, and what do you know, you've got no effect monsters now, so you can special summon another one. Repeat this process, summoning non-effect Link monsters, and you can make your way all the way up to Berserker, who is the strongest non-effect Link in the game. Doing this will also fill up your graveyard with Tenyis, and fun fact, all of them have graveyard effects that activate by banishing themselves. Some of them offer protection. If your non-effect monster fights an opponent's monster, Nahata reduces the opponent's attack by 1500. If your non-effect monster is targeted by some effect, Mapura can negate and destroy that effect. And if your non-effect monster is destroyed, Shitana brings it back and lets you destroy an opponent's monster without targeting it. These other 3 have effects that you can activate on your turn if you control a non-effect monster. Adhara lets you add a banished worm back to your hand, which all the Tenyis are worms, by the way, so it's free recycling. Vishuddha lets you bounce a card your opponent controls back to the hand, and Ajna lets you summon a Tenyi from the deck, but locks you into only summoning worms for the rest of the turn. This is the only one we play at 3 because it effectively toolboxes out every other Tenyi monster. Worried about targeting? Summon the red guy. Big beatsticks got you spooked? Get the green guy, and so on. Depending on what the meta is like where you play, you may want to take some of these out or add more copies in. For me, I just run 2 of each, and then have a 3rd copy in the side deck, which I can adjust accordingly. Anyway, that's pretty much the Tenyi half of the deck. As for the Metalfoes, they bring a lot of snacks to the party, if you know what I mean. Obviously, they're normal monsters, and some of them have pretty high attack values, so you can use them with all your graveyard Tenyi effects if need be. They're also pendulum monsters, so if you get 2 Metalfoes with different scales, you can pendulum summon everything in the deck, except for this one level 1 dude, but he doesn't count. They also share the same pendulum effect, which is once per turn, target a face-up card you control, destroy it, and if you do, set a Metalfoe spell trap from your deck. If you've already got your Link 3, this can be a great way to get one of your weaker Tenyis into the graveyard while deck thinning in the process. We're only playing 1 target, which is Metalfoe's counter, a trap that says, if a card you control is destroyed, you can summon a Metalfoe from your deck. This offers not protection per se, but another layer for your opponent to deal with, and some potential swarming. If your Tenyi link gets destroyed, you can activate this and summon out the big honkin' 2400 attack Metalfoe in its place. Alternatively, if counter survives to your turn, you can destroy another Tenyi with one of your Metalfoes, and then activate counter then, adding another big beat stick to your field. Perhaps the best use of Metalfoes, though, is for Super Polymerization, which, if you're somehow unaware, lets you fusion using your opponent's monsters. Oh, and also they can't respond to it and negate it in any way. Yeah, it's pretty busted, and Metalfoes have some of the best targets for it. Their fusion lineup includes monsters with the following materials: one Metalfoe and one normal monster, one Metalfoe and any monster with 2500 or less attack, one Metalfoe and one pendulum monster, two Metalfoes, which isn't really good for Super Poly, but it can steal games so you still play one. And perhaps the best of the bunch, Crinsamite, who needs one Metalfoe and two monsters with 3000 or less attack. Needless to say, if your opponent's deck plays monsters, they probably have Super Poly targets. Best of all, though, the two most generic fusions in here, they're non-effect monsters, meaning best case scenario, you can make your Link 1 Tenyi, normal summon a Metalfoe, Super Poly away your opponent's two best monsters for Mobile Suit Krungus over here, then link ladder up to Berserker with the rest of your hand, and end the turn with two 3k beat sticks that have a shit ton of protection. And that's pretty much the game plan. Everything else in here is just some support, some of it better than others. Starting with the good stuff, Vessel for the Dragon Cycle lets you dump a worm from your deck to the graveyard, and then if you control a non-effect monster, you can add a Tenyi from your deck to your hand with a different name. It's a foolish burial that searches if you control anything. Play 3 always. Next up is the field spell, Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi, which is kind of a redundant name, but a pretty good card. It says all non-effect monsters are unaffected by monster effects, which, you know, protects you from half the removal in the game. And if that wasn't enough, once per turn, if you have a non-effect monster and your opponent summons an effect monster, you draw 2 cards. Pretty sweet for a deck that's trying to out-resource your opponent. Moving down to the support I'm considering removing, Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi is a counter trap that negates spells, traps, and monster effects while you control a non-effect monster. Which seems pretty good until you realize it only negates, it doesn't destroy. This is fine when you're talking about normal spells and traps, which, to be fair, are the only things you really need to worry about if you've got the field spell, but there's been many times when I kind of wish this was just Solemn Judgment instead. Or, I don't know, maybe copies of Terraforming and Metaverse so I can get to that sweet field spell faster. Hard to say, it works decently, but I think if I had another week to test this, I might relegate this to the side deck and only bring it out against spell-heavy decks. Finally, there's our last card, Twin Twisters. It's spell trap removal. You like stuff in the graveyard, kind of a no-brainer. Take it out against swarm decks, maybe replace it entirely with some other staple, relegate this to the side if you're playing it seriously, I don't know. All that leaves us with then is the side deck, about half of which is actual side deck cards. I was watching Farfa play Pure Tenyi and he ran Vanity's Fiend, which is a pretty great idea if you're going first, since you can often make your fields without normal summoning, and then just tribute an extra Tenyi for this thing. I was doing a go second build though, and Floodgates are kind of boring to watch on What a Deck, so I didn't include this, but if you're playing this IRL, I'd try and find room for it since it can win the game on its own. Other than that, like I said before, 1 copy of each of the Tenyi to swap out as the match requires. I've also got some Super Poly targets in here, like Starving Venom and Mud Dragon, if they fit your opponent's deck. Metalfoes Fusion is something I played at 1 for a long time, might be main deck worthy, gives you access to your toolbox of Metalfoes cards a lot easier, and you can search it with your Metalfoes monsters by using their pendulum effects. The only problem is, it becomes kind of useless in a grind game when you're low on resources, and this is all about the grind game, and sometimes it's just a straight up dead card if you have no Metalfoes in your hand, so I ended up taking it out. Side in a copy if one of the Metalfoes fusions in particular is going to be of great use to you. Everything else in here is just alternative options. There's a new Link 3 Tenyi out in Japan. It's pretty good, probably worth running at 1, but it's like some weird promo card, so I have no idea when we'll get it in America, and generally I try to play decks that you can build in the TCG right now. This deck does have one card not out at the time of recording, but it'll be out at the end of the month, and for the most part, everything else here is TCG legal. Finally, there's the elephant in the room, Mare. This is a worm monster. You can dump it in the grave with Vessel for the Dragon Cycle, and summon it out of the graveyard with the Tenyi Link 2, which is an effect monster that lets you discard a card to revive a worm in the graveyard. Mare is really good in this deck because it can summon 3 tokens that'll help with link climbing. It's also a tuner, so you get access to synchros, specifically the Tenyi synchro and the Yang Zing synchros that help out with worms. People were recommending this to me all throughout testing, and I pretty much ignored them because this deck was doing very well without it, and I was just really focused on the non-effect monsters. I didn't think it was worth throwing in a Garnet just to potentially raise the power ceiling, and I realize now that I was completely wrong. This is a great card for Tenyi, and probably should be included in the main deck of any Tenyi build. The only reason I didn't put it into mine is because I didn't realize its greatness until, like, yesterday, a day before I recorded, and I didn't want to use something that I hadn't tested with and potentially mess up the combos or misexplain it. So yeah, it should be in the deck, but it's not because I'm an idiot and I didn't learn the combos in time. If you're playing this yourself though, do yourself a favor, put one Mare in. Regardless, with that being said, there is the deck. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see Metalfoes in action, you can check out the main video. There I'll be playing 10 random duels against opponents on YGOPro, just showing off how this thing works in action. Or if you're short on time, check out the replay video. Both should be on the end card and linked down in the description. Anyway, until next time, good luck and have fun.